From high above, a devastating machine streaks downward, obliterating everything in its path. Fast, powerful, unstoppable. This is a weapon of war that delivers such overwhelming destruction that no target it locks onto can survive. It is the Meteor. But this is not some colossal asteroid from space. It is the Meteor, a missile developed in Sweden, now aimed squarely at Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin appears rattled as Sweden gears up for a massive aid package to Ukraine, one that Russia cannot ignore in terms of sheer capability. Reports of the Meteor missile potentially heading to Ukraine surfaced following accounts from February 1 of a recent meeting between Ukrainian Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov and his Swedish counterpart Paul Jansson. The core focus was the major military assistance package Sweden is preparing for Ukraine. The package carries significant weight on its own, and details on its contents will be examined before turning to the most attention-grabbing weapon, the missile. Comment number 2 if you support Ukraine, number 3 if you support Russia, and number 4 if you love peace. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, Sweden is readying a large-scale aid package that includes air defense systems, Saab-produced radars, and contributions to Ukraine's defense industrial base, such as additional electronic warfare systems and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, including long-range attack drones. Euromaidan Press provided further details on the meeting, noting that the long-range attack UAVs in the package would enable Ukraine to strike Russian targets deep behind the front lines. Ukraine has extensive experience in this domain. In 2025 alone, Ukrainian long-range UAVs hit 16 major Russian oil refineries. Many of them struck multiple times, according to Euronews reports. At one point, Ukraine managed to knock out 38% of Russia's nominal refining capacity, underscoring just how effective its long-range strike capabilities have become. With Swedish backing, Ukraine's UAV attacks are set to grow even more potent. It remains unclear whether Sweden will supply its own produced UAVs to Ukraine or support domestic production through the military aid package. What is known is that on January 12th, Sweden announced plans to invest approximately $440 million in developing its own long-range UAVs and electronic warfare systems. Portions of what Sweden intends to develop could eventually reach Ukraine, ultimately targeting key Russian military assets.
The Euromaidan Press also highlighted another critical aspect of the Fedorov-Jansson discussions, bolstering Ukraine's air defense, particularly against the threat of Russian ballistic missiles. Ukraine offered few specifics on what Sweden plans to provide in this area. Still, indications suggest Sweden could help Ukraine gain access to additional defensive systems via the Pearl initiative, which will be explored in more detail later. And then there is the main focus, the Meteor weapon.
First, it should be noted that the Swedish Meteor missile is unlikely to be part of the upcoming aid package Sweden intends to deliver to Ukraine. That package appears centered on radars, air defense systems, UAVs, and electronic warfare capabilities mentioned by Fedorov. However, according to Pravda reports, the two sides at the meeting discussed the possibility of Sweden supplying Meteor missiles to Ukraine in the future, especially as a means to counter Russian aircraft releasing guided glide bombs from standoff distances behind the front lines. Thus, the Meteor remains a potential for now, but one that could become a Ukrainian asset in the near term. That future seems closer than ever, and Putin is surely horrified by the prospect of Sweden's breakthrough missile appearing in Ukraine.
There are plenty of reasons the Meteor poses a major threat, and its technical specifications alone explain why Russia would dread seeing it in Ukrainian hands. According to Saab, the Meteor is a beyond visual range air-to-air missile, BVRAM, capable of engaging targets from extreme distances before the target aircraft even detects the launching platform. The missile is said to feature the largest no-escape zone of any air-to-air system and can operate autonomously even in the complex electronic warfare environments Russia excels at creating. Its reported no-escape zone is around 37 miles, 60 kilometers. Once the Meteor closes within this range or nearer, the target has virtually no chance of evading the missile's powerful high-explosive warhead. The Meteor specs are even more impressive beyond that. True to its name, it reaches terrifying speeds exceeding Mach 4, equivalent to over 3,000 miles per hour. It has a range of approximately 60 miles, 100 kilometers, and carries a high explosive fragmentation warhead.
Target acquisition relies on impact sensors and radar proximity fusing, while sustained speed comes from a solid-fuel rocket booster combined with a throttleable ramjet engine. The Meteor can even adjust its trajectory mid-flight through inertial guidance supplemented by real-time data link updates. Currently, however, the Meteor is compatible only with select Western fighters, such as F-35 JSF, Eurofighter Typhoon, Dassault Rafale, and JAS Gripen. Ukraine has signed an agreement to acquire around 100 Rafale aircraft from France, but deliveries have not begun and will roll out gradually over the coming decade. Ukraine does not yet operate the other types either. That said, the JAS Gripen is Sweden's own fighter, hinting that another topic may have come up during the early February defense ministers' meeting. According to Army recognition, Sweden is not the only Ukrainian ally involved in the Meteor program. The publication notes that the missile results from collaboration among several European nations, including Germany, Italy, France, Spain, and the UK. Countries that, alongside Sweden, have made substantial contributions to Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression. Army recognition also provided details on the Meteor's warhead, considered one of the most advanced in air-to-air missiles. By employing both impact and radar proximity fusing, the Meteor can destroy targets in multiple ways. As an offensive weapon, it can pursue highly maneuverable targets, detonating on direct impact or when close enough for its powerful blast to inflict damage even without a perfect hit. Standard evasive tactics by fighter pilots are likely ineffective against the Meteor, and outrunning its speed is simply impossible. The only Russian aircraft capable of Mach 4 speeds is the experimental MiG-41, but that platform remains far from deployment in the Ukraine theater. Thus, from a pure destructive standpoint, the Meteor holds major significance for Ukraine. It is an extraordinarily powerful missile capable of engaging nearly any airborne target Ukraine chooses. The ability to engage beyond visual range targets at around 60 miles, 100 kilometers, represents a huge advantage for Ukraine. According to United 24 Media, much of Russia's airborne threat, particularly devastating guided glide bombs, stems from Russian aircraft operating far enough behind the front lines to stay beyond the reach of Ukraine's older air-to-air missiles. Ukraine has limited options for response beyond mid-range UAV strikes, and UAVs tend to perform better against ground targets than airborne ones. Russia remains highly dangerous with its glide bombs and missiles. On February 1st, Euromaidan Press cited figures released by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who stated that in January 2026 alone, Russia launched over 6,000 attack UAVs, approximately 5,500 guided bombs, and 158 missiles of various types, likely including air-launched cruise missiles, against Ukraine. These figures have become typical for Russia, and the latter two threats are precisely what the Meteor can address. While the missile is not primarily designed to down glide bombs or missiles in flight, though it appears capable, the Meteor's 60-mile, 100-kilometer range would give Ukraine the option to launch against the Russian fighters and bombers that deploy those guided weapons. Destroying a bomb or missile might save a city from attack, but eliminating the launching aircraft would prevent far greater harm. Russia's guided glide bombs are growing more dangerous, and Ukraine now knows far more about them than before. According to United 24 Media reporting on findings from Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence, HER, 31 companies are involved in producing Russia's Universal Planning and Correction Modules, UMPK, which convert older dumb bombs like the FAB series into guided glide weapons. HER revealed that UMPK kits feature smart glide control systems combining satellite navigation with Cometa antennas resistant to jamming. An inertial guidance system is also incorporated, showing these UMPK modules are far more advanced than Russia's earlier basic glide bombs, which relied more on mass than precision for effect. Ukraine indicated that some of the 31 companies tied to UMPK production remain unsanctioned, including Kurgan Pribor, which develops and installs computing systems for Russian fighters like the Su-34 and Su-35, while also assembling UMPK-250 and UMPK-500 modules. Ukraine believes sanctioning this company would significantly reduce the glide bomb threat. The arrival of the Meteor would provide major additional support. Sweden could help Ukraine neutralize the glide bomb danger, where sanctions have yet to deliver results. The Meteor's beyond visual range engagement capability offers Ukraine a tremendous potential edge. According to Army recognition, the Meteor reaching Ukraine would provide a qualitatively superior air-to-air missile far beyond anything currently in Ukraine's arsenal. The impact of this capability shift would hit Russia hard. In practical terms, this is not merely an additional munition. It is a tool designed to alter how adversary aviation can operate safely, and it is particularly suited to Ukraine's current combat environment, where Russian aircraft rely heavily on standoff attack tactics, Army recognition assessed.
That said, the Meteor is not powerful enough to grant Ukraine full air superiority, at least beyond creating localized pockets of control in certain areas. What truly matters about the Meteor is the qualitative leap it represents, signaling a shift in how Ukraine's allies equip the country to fight Russia. In the past, allies typically topped off Ukraine's arsenal as needed. That pattern may continue, but if Sweden delivers the Meteor, it would mark a pivot toward European allies actively shaping Ukraine's combat capabilities in the war against Russia. In other words, Sweden is not just supplying more of what Ukraine already has, it aims to help Ukraine transform into a far more effective offensive force than ever before. That is the real reason Putin fears it. Sweden may be helping forge a version of Ukraine that Russia has never faced.
Still, some earlier points warrant revisiting. First, the transfer of the Meteor to Ukraine has been discussed but not finalized between the two countries. Second, even if Sweden shipped Meteor missiles today, Ukraine lacks the compatible aircraft platforms to employ them, at least for the time being. The possibility of Ukraine acquiring one of those platforms has been suggested, and once again, Sweden would play a key role. On October 22, the Swedish government announced that President Zelensky and Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson had signed a letter of intent, marking the first step toward a major export agreement. Kristersson explained, "I am proud to welcome President Zelensky to Sweden and Linköping. Today, we have signed an important letter of intent, marking a step toward a massive possible export deal regarding Gripen, likely between 100 and 150 fighter jets, to build a new and very powerful Ukrainian air force." Of course, a letter of intent does not guarantee Ukraine will receive at least 100 Gripen aircraft. Many variables could change between signing and delivery. Nevertheless, the letter demonstrates that Ukraine is actively pursuing the aircraft platforms needed to fire Meteor missiles at Russia. The Gripen may even prove the ideal fighter for the task. After all, a missile developed in Sweden, or at least co-developed with other European nations, could achieve peak effectiveness when launched from a Swedish fighter. The Gripen E can carry up to 7 Meteor missiles, amplifying the threat to Russian aircraft striking Ukraine from standoff distances behind the front lines. According to Zelensky, the first Gripen aircraft could arrive in Ukraine sooner than anticipated. Days after signing the letter of intent with Sweden, the Ukrainian president declared, "A historic step has been taken, an agreement with Sweden on Gripen fighter jets, and it is a good choice. We expect up to 150 such aircraft for Ukraine, with the first ones projected to arrive next year." In other words, the initial Gripen deliveries to Ukraine are slated for 2026, with the fleet continuing to grow in subsequent years, as the letter of intent translates into concrete enhancements for Ukraine's Air Force, upgrades for which Russia has no real counter. Furthermore, according to Pravda, former Ukrainian Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal stated in November that plans exist to turn Ukraine into a Gripen producer. On November 6th, a memorandum was signed between a Ukrainian company and Saab regarding future localization of Gripen production in Ukraine. Shmyhal reported, "We expect that from 2033, Gripen will be significantly localized in Ukraine, from assembly of major components to production of individual parts." While the production facility will not be ready before 2033, the very concept shows Sweden's full confidence that Ukraine can and will defend itself against Putin's invasion. Ukraine is reciprocating Sweden's efforts with matching actions. Euromaidan Press reported that Fedorov and Johnson discussed launching a joint program based on Ukraine's Brave 1 technology cluster, tentatively called Brave Sweden. The program would enable defense companies to receive co-funded grants for developing new technologies that Ukraine can test and deploy on the front lines. Additionally, the two defense ministers explored starting a joint defense technology program, including production in Sweden of undisclosed Ukrainian security systems.
In this way, Sweden has established itself as one of Ukraine's most vital partners, and it is safe to predict what comes next. Much more is on the way. As noted earlier, Fedorov and Johnson discussed Sweden's potential further contributions to the PURL program, with a particular focus on helping Ukraine acquire additional weapons to counter Russian ballistic missile threats. This could translate into supplying more Patriot air defense systems and missiles for them. PURL has already made a major difference for Ukraine. Short for Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List, it is a U.S. and NATO-initiated mechanism ensuring Ukraine receives more of what it truly needs rather than just what donors happen to have available.
Ukraine has submitted a prioritized requirements list, primarily focused on U.S.-made weapons it urgently requires. NATO member states can contribute funds to purchase this equipment from the US and then transfer it to Ukraine. Launched in 2025, the program had seen Ukraine's partners contribute around $4 billion as of December 10 last year. If Sweden adds contributions to Pearl along else it is doing for Ukraine, the arrival of the Meteor missile would stand out as the most emphatic enhancement Ukraine has ever received, and knowing Ukraine, it would waste no time putting it straight down Putin's throat. Comment number 2 if you support Ukraine, number 3 if you support Russia, and number 4 if you love peace.